April 8, 1943. High above the occupied heart of France, the theater of war was about to witness a debut unlike any other. For Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachin, veteran ace of WW2 26, the morning held the promise of another easy victory. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, he watched, a subtle smirk playing beneath his oxygen mask, as ungainly silhouettes climbed laboriously towards his formation. These were the new American fighters, making their inaugural combat sortie over occupied Europe. Hermachin, with dozens of victories etched into his consciousness from campaigns over Poland, France, Britain, and Russia, could barely contain his mirth. "They've sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted, the crackle of his voice laced with mocking laughter, a sound echoed by his wingman. Below them, 16 Republic P-47C Thunderbolts of the American 4th Fighter Group lumbered upwards in tight formation. Their immense 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engines strained audibly against the immense, almost 7-ton weight of their frames. To German pilots, accustomed to the sleek, agile Spitfires and the nimble Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost comically out of place. Barrel-shaped fuselages, topped with bulbous, greenhouse-like canopies, wings that seemed almost an afterthought, too small for their massive bodies, and propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's inventory. They defied every convention of elegant fighter design, every notion of speed and agility that had defined air combat for years. What Hermachin and his fellow pilots did not know, what none of the German aces circling like wolves above could possibly have imagined in that moment of derision, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the very weapon that, within 18 short months, would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's once unbeatable fighter arm. The laughter would fade, replaced by a cold, escalating terror as these flying milk bottles transformed into instruments of unimaginable destruction. That morning, in the azure expanse over France, the future of aerial warfare was quietly, clumsily ascending. For the young men of the American 4th Fighter Group, April 8, 1943 was a day etched into history long before it had even begun. Weeks, months of training, preparation, and the anxious anticipation of their first true combat mission culminated in this moment. They were novices, fresh-faced and eager, but untested in the brutal crucible of European skies. Their machines, the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, were equally untested, making their combat debut over a continent that had been a battleground for aerial warfare for nearly 4 years. These weren't the nimble, lightweight interceptors the Germans and British had perfected. The Thunderbolt was a brute force approach to aerial combat, an uncompromising design born from a philosophy that prioritized resilience, power, and overwhelming firepower above all else. Its immense Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine, a marvel of engineering, churned out prodigious amounts of power, but it was battling the equally prodigious weight of the aircraft itself. Each P-47, fully loaded, approached 7 tons. Ascending to 27,000 feet, where the German fighters waited, was not a climb. It was a defiant, laborious struggle against gravity, consuming fuel and taxing engines that roared with every gained foot of altitude. Below them, the patchwork fields of France, scarred by years of conflict, seemed impossibly far away. Above, the predatory eyes of the Luftwaffe watched, their pilots seasoned veterans, many of whom had been fighting continuously since 1939. They had honed their skills over the plains of Poland, the skies of France, the Channel during the Battle of Britain, and the vast expanses of the Eastern Front. The Americans, in stark contrast, had been in combat for exactly 0 days. This monumental disparity in experience, coupled with the Germans' initial assessment of the Thunderbolt's cumbersome appearance, created a volatile cocktail of overconfidence and underestimation. The stage was set not just for a dogfight, but for a profound clash of ideologies, of industrial might against established tactical brilliance, a contest where the very definition of a fighter plane was about to be rewritten. High above the nascent struggle of the American formation, the German pilots of WW2 26 moved with the fluid grace of apex predators. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachin, a name whispered with grudging respect among his peers, was a master of his craft. His Focke-Wulf 190A5 was not merely an aircraft, it was an extension of his will, a finely tuned instrument of destruction that responded to his slightest command. The Verger, or butcher bird as it was affectionately known, was a testament to German engineering, robust, powerful, and incredibly maneuverable, particularly at medium altitudes. Hermachin had cut his teeth against the finest pilots the world had to offer, from the intrepid Poles to the tenacious British and the relentless Soviets. He knew the tells, the weaknesses, the subtle signs of inexperience that betrayed a novice. And as he watched the American P-47s climb, he saw nothing but targets. Their struggle for altitude was a stark contrast to the easy ascent of his own fighter, an aircraft designed for speed, climb, and devastating attacks. The chatter over the radio was a symphony of confidence, seasoned veterans exchanging casual observations, tinged with a predatory amusement. "They waddle like geese," one pilot remarked. "Are we to herd them, Hermachin, or simply pluck their feathers?" The laughter that followed was genuine, born of a long string of victories and an unwavering belief in their tactical superiority. These were men who lived and breathed aerial combat, who had seen every trick, every new machine thrown against them, and had always emerged victorious. They had established the doctrines of modern airfighting, the lightning-fast intercept, the devastating hit-and-run, the intricate dance of the dogfight. Their strategy was honed, their tactics refined through relentless engagement. They understood the physics of flight, the delicate balance of speed, turn, and climb. And what they saw below them defied all of it. A machine that seemed to actively reject the principles of agility and lightness. It was a puzzle, but one they believed they had already solved. A slow, heavy target, ripe for the picking. They positioned themselves, not with caution, but with the arrogant certainty of a hunter cornering its prey, confident that their superior speed, experience, and the inherent agility of their Focke-Wulfs would make short work of these lumbering newcomers.
Weil die deutschen Piloten scornten ihren Appealance, die Republik P-47 Thunderbolt repräsentierte eine radikale, oft heretische Departure von konventioneller Fighter-Design-Philosophie. Für Jahre hatte der Versuch für leichte Interceptor, Aircraft optimiert für rapide Climb-Rates und razorscharf Turn-Performance. Die Spitfire, das Messerschmitt Bf 109, ebenso die Focke-Wulf 190, alle emboditen dieses Ethos, Agilität, Speed und Responsivität. Aber Republic Aviation, unter der visionären Leadership von Designer Alexander Kartveli, hat dared zu ermahnen something and ganz different. Sie kreierten nicht einen Nimble Dancer, sondern ein High-Altitude Juggernaut, eine Flying Fortress auf einem ganz neuen Klass. Der P-47 war Bild um einen zentralen, unkompromissierenden Komponenten, das monströse Pratt & Whitney A2800 Double Wasp Engine. Dieses 18-Zylinder airkühlte Radial-Engine war ein Powerhouse, capable von delivering immense thrust, especially when paired mit des elaboriertem Turbo-Supercharger-System, welches dem Thunderbolt zu maintainen seine Power eben auf extreme Altituden ermöglichte. Um dieses Behemoth eines Engines zu akkommodieren, along with its extensive Intercooler und Ducting, das rannte vom Fond zu dem very tail des Aircrafts, der Fusage hatte zu weit und tief sein, hence its distinctive barrel-shaped appearance. Every inch des P-47 screamed Mass und Power. Es war heavy, ja, unbedingt so, particularly in einer Ära, wo leichtwegig oft auch gleich letal war. Aber diese Mass war nicht eine Liabilität, es war ein integraler Capacitor der Combat Doctrine. Diese Mass meant structural integrity, eine incredible capacity to absorb battle damage und keep flying. Es meant stability in a dive, allowing the pilot to accelerate to breathtaking speeds without fear von structural failure. Und most critically, it meant a stable platform für eine unanparallelte Konzentration von Firepower. Der Thunderbolt didn't aim to outturn its adversaries, it aimed to outmuscle them, to overpower them with sheer force and velocity. It was a fighter designed to deliver a hammer blow, not a surgeon's cut. Dies war die industrielle Logik, die soon beginnen zu defieren die taktische Brillanz der Old World, eine Waffe forged in dem Crucible von American Manufacturing Might, ready to redefine the very rules of aerial warfare. Beyond its formidable engine and robust construction, the true devastating secret weapon of the P-47 Thunderbolt lay hidden within its broad, seemingly innocuous wings, its unprecedented firepower. This was not a fighter designed for surgical strikes, it was designed for total annihilation. Each P-47 was armed with no less than 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, 4 nestled in each wing. The .50 caliber machine gun was already a respected weapon, known for its punch and range, but the sheer volume of 8 of them firing simultaneously transformed it into something truly terrifying. Each aircraft carried a staggering 3,400 rounds of ammunition, enough to sustain prolonged engagements. When all 8 guns were brought to bear, they unleashed a combined rate of fire of approximately 6,000 rounds per minute. Picture that, 100 rounds every single second. This was not merely suppressive fire, this was a wall of incandescent lead, a concentrated storm of destruction designed to shred anything in its path. The mathematics of destruction were loaded into those broad wings, and the implications were horrifyingly simple. A German Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf, built for speed and agility but not for resilience, could be torn apart, literally ripped in half, in less than 2 seconds of sustained fire. The flying milk bottles were, in fact, flying shredders. This overwhelming destructive capacity was the P-47's answer to the agility of its adversaries. While a German fighter might outturn a Thunderbolt, it could not withstand a fraction of its concentrated firepower. The strategy was clear: get the enemy in your sights, even for the briefest moment, and unleash hell. This unparalleled arsenal was the silent, deadly promise of the P-47, a promise that the German pilots, in their initial amusement, had not yet begun to comprehend. The sound of those 8.50 caliber machine guns, once heard, would soon become the most feared and desperate sound in the skies over occupied Europe, a harbinger of inescapable doom.
Among the 56 American pilots spread across the vast French sky that morning, one man carried the weight of experience that transcended the raw inexperience of his squadron, Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron. Blakesley was no novice. He was a seasoned veteran of the legendary Eagle Squadrons, American volunteers who had flown with the Royal Air Force in their Spitfires during the darkest days of the Battle of Britain. He had danced in the skies with the best the Luftwaffe had to offer, mastering the art of the tight turn, the lightning-fast deflection shot, the intricate ballet of close-quarters dogfighting that defined aerial combat in a Spitfire. Just weeks earlier, Blakesley had transitioned from the nimble, almost delicate Spitfire to the massive, brutish P-47 Thunderbolt. It was like trading a rapier for a broadsword, a racehorse for a rhinoceros. He understood, perhaps uniquely among his peers, that survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The tactics perfected in a Spitfire, built for agility and turn fighting, simply wouldn't work in the Thunderbolt. Attempting to outturn a Focke-Wulf 190 in a P-47 was a recipe for disaster. Blakesley recognized that the P-47 was not an evolution of the traditional fighter, it was a revolution. Its strengths lay not in finesse, but in raw power, speed, and devastating straight-line performance. The key, he realized, was boom and zoom. Dive in at incredible speed, unleash a torrent of fire, and then use that same speed to zoom away and regain altitude, always maintaining the energy advantage. Never, under any circumstances, engage in a turning fight. His challenge now was to instill this radical new philosophy into his eager but inexperienced pilots, many of whom still carried the ingrained instincts of previous, lighter aircraft. As he spotted the German formation positioning for their attack, Blakesley's gaze hardened. He knew what his men didn't yet know, that this day would not be about proving the P-47's agility, but about showcasing its unholy power and initiating a new, brutal chapter in aerial warfare. The battle wasn't just in the sky, it was a battle of minds, of old doctrines against a nascent, terrifyingly effective new one. The skies above France on April 8, 1943, were not just a battleground for opposing air forces, they were a proving ground for fundamentally divergent philosophies of air combat. For years, German aircraft design, exemplified by the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190, had focused on creating lightweight, agile interceptors. These machines were optimized for rapid climb rights, tight turning circles, and quick acceleration, designed to gain altitude rapidly and engage in the intricate dance of the dogfight, a ballet of turns, rolls, and evasive maneuvers. The German pilots, steeped in this tradition, were masters of this close-quarters combat, relying on their superior maneuverability to get inside an enemy's turn radius and deliver the killing blow. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, however, was born from an entirely different worldview. Republic Aviation had created something unprecedented, a high-altitude juggernaut that redefined the rules of aerial warfare not through agility, but through sheer mass, power, and overwhelming firepower. The P-47 didn't turn on a dime. It was built to dive like an anvil, gathering colossal speed, and then use that speed to zoom back to altitude, preserving its energy. This was the boom and zoom tactic, where the Thunderbolt would exploit its immense weight and powerful engine to achieve unparalleled diving speeds, make a devastating pass, and then climb rapidly out of danger, using its superior horsepower to disengage and set up another attack. It avoided the close-in turning fights that favored the lighter German planes. The P-47's robust construction allowed it to withstand forces that would tear apart lighter aircraft in a high-speed dive, giving its pilots a critical advantage in energy management. The philosophical clash was stark. The Germans sought to outturn, outclimb, and outmaneuver. The Americans with the P-47 sought to outspeed, outpower, and utterly overwhelm. This monumental difference in design and doctrine meant that the battlefield was not merely a physical space, but a conceptual one, where two distinct approaches to aerial combat were about to collide, with profound implications for the future of air power and the fate of the Luftwaffe.
Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky that morning were men who would, in the coming months, become legends. Their names, Gabreski, Johnson, Zemke, would strike fear into the hearts of Luftwaffe pilots, etched into the annals of aerial combat. But on April 8, 1943, they were simply novices. They were young men, fresh out of training, their hands still learning the precise touch required for high-G maneuvers, their eyes not yet accustomed to the bewildering chaos of a true aerial engagement. They had studied tactics, practiced dogfights against their own, but nothing could prepare them for the reality of facing the most experienced fighter force in the world. The Germans had been fighting continuously since 1939, their ranks filled with aces whose kill tallies soared into the dozens, even hundreds. They had perfected their craft over 4 long years, in skies ranging from the freezing Eastern Front to the turbulent English Channel. The Americans, by contrast, had been in combat for exactly 0 days. This was their baptism of fire, a terrifying plunge into a realm where the rules were written in tracers and the stakes were life and death. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Some pilots stared straight ahead, a grim determination masking their apprehension. Others glanced around, their eyes wide, trying to absorb every detail of the vast, unforgiving sky. Every twitch of the controls, every subtle shift in the wind, every glint of sun off a distant wing was magnified by the weight of the moment. They were flying an untested machine against a seasoned enemy in an environment where a single mistake could be fatal. The P-47 was a beast of an aircraft, powerful and resilient, but it demanded a new kind of pilot, a new way of thinking. These young men, still learning the idiosyncrasies of their Thunderbolts, were about to be thrust into a brutal education. They were about to discover, in the harshest possible way, the true meaning of air combat and the formidable challenge that lay ahead, not just for them, but for the untamed power they now commanded.
The silence was broken by the guttural roar of engines and the sharp crackle of radio calls. Bandits at 11 o'clock high. The engagement began not with a bang, but with a chaotic blur of metal and tracers. For the inexperienced American pilots, the initial moments were a dizzying maelstrom. Instinct, honed by training on lighter aircraft, screamed for them to turn and engage the agile Focke-Wulfs in a dogfight. But in the heavy Thunderbolt, attempting to match the tight turns of the German 190s was suicidal. Several P-47s found themselves quickly outmaneuvered, German cannon shells ripping through their wings and fuselages. The initial laughter of Hermachin's squadron might have turned into confident shouts as they easily danced around the seemingly clumsy American planes. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and the tension of combat. A young American pilot, his face contorted in concentration, pulled back hard on the stick, trying desperately to shake a pursuing FW-190, only to find his Thunderbolt wallowing, losing speed. It was a brutal lesson in energy management. But then, a flash of insight, or perhaps a desperate instinct, took over. Remembering Blakesley's warnings, some pilots broke away, abandoning the futile turning fight. They pushed their throttles to the firewall, dropped their noses, and dove. And as they plummeted, gaining incredible speed, the true nature of the P-47 began to assert itself. One pilot, narrowly escaping a German pass, found himself with a fleeting opportunity. As he zoomed away, a Focke-Wulf inadvertently crossed his path. For a fraction of a second, the German plane was centered in his gun sight. He squeezed the trigger. The sky ripped open with a sound unlike anything the German pilots had heard before. The deep, sustained roar of 850 caliber machine guns, an angry, tearing sound that spoke of overwhelming, indiscriminate power. Tracers converged, finding their mark. Even for a momentary burst, the sheer volume of fire was staggering. The German pilot, momentarily stunned by the concentrated onslaught, broke off. The initial clash was messy, a mix of American inexperience and German tactical prowess. But in those first frantic moments, a seed was planted. The Thunderbolts were not nimble, but they were fast, robust, and their bite was terrifying. The transformation had begun, signaled by the shocking, visceral sound of 6,000 rounds per minute tearing through the fragile piece of the European sky.
That April morning was just the beginning. The German pilot's laughter, so confident and dismissive, slowly, inexorably began to turn to apprehension, then to a creeping dread, and finally to outright terror. Over the next 18 months, the flying milk bottles would evolve from objects of derision into instruments of systematic destruction. The inexperienced American pilots, learning quickly from the hard lessons of combat and guided by the pioneering tactics of men like Blakesley, began to master the unique strengths of their Thunderbolts. They learned to shun the close-in dogfight, embracing instead the boom and zoom tactics, using their P-47's speed and diving capabilities to strike with overwhelming force and then escape before the Germans could react. German debriefings, once filled with confident recaps of victories, now became somber discussions about these new, seemingly indestructible American fighters. Their pilots reported with a growing sense of alarm. The Thunderbolts could absorb incredible amounts of damage and still return to base. Their dives were impossible to match, and their firepower? The memory of that concentrated storm of 850 caliber machine guns tearing into an aircraft was enough to send shivers down their spines. The distinctive ripping sound of those 50 calibers became the most feared sound in the skies above the Reich. It wasn't the elegant crackle of a cannon, but a raw, tearing fury that promised instant disintegration. The Luftwaffe, already stretched thin across multiple fronts, began to feel the relentless pressure. Each P-47 sortie wasn't just a combat mission, it was a systematic attrition. The mathematics of destruction loaded in those broad wings were now playing out daily. German fighter strength, once overwhelming, began a steady, agonizing decline. Their best pilots, irreplaceable veterans of years of war, were being shot down by these jugs, often before they even knew what hit them. The initial contempt had evaporated, replaced by a grudging respect, and then a profound existential fear. The American pilots, once novices, were now seasoned aces, their Thunderbolts adorned with increasing numbers of kill markings. The Luftwaffe, a pride of the Third Reich, was slowly but surely being ground into dust, not by tactical brilliance alone, but by a relentless combination of quality, quantity, and a brute force approach that it simply could not counter.
The laughter had died, replaced by the grim reality of a new, more terrifying kind of aerial war. The story of April 8, 1943, and the initial encounter between Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachin's confident Focke-Wulfs and the lumbering P-47 Thunderbolts is more than just a tale of a single aerial engagement. It is a profound parable of industrial logic defeating tactical brilliance, of how sheer quantity, when married to revolutionary quality, can merge into an overwhelming, unstoppable superiority. The Germans, with their refined tactics and highly experienced pilots, had mastered the art of aerial combat, but they were outmaneuvered not by cunning, but by the relentless march of industrial might. Republic aviation had created a weapon that fundamentally shifted the paradigm. The P-47, initially mocked as a flying milk bottle, became known by its pilots and its terrified adversaries as the Jug, short for Juggernaut. It wasn't elegant, but it was effective, robust, and capable of inflicting unparalleled destruction. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns, once underestimated, became the instruments of a systematic, sustained attrition that the Luftwaffe simply could not endure. They could not outproduce the American factories, nor could they withstand the relentless, concentrated firepower that hammered their aircraft into submission. The transformation was complete, from an object of derision to an instrument of terror. The laughter of Oberleutnant Hermachin and his squadron had turned to a chilling recognition of an undeniable truth. The P-47 Thunderbolt was the weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. This wasn't just about winning battles, it was about winning the war by dismantling the enemy's air superiority, piece by agonizing piece. The P-47 Thunderbolt became the harbinger of a new era, a symbol of American industrial might and ingenuity, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most effective and feared fighter aircraft of World War II. Its thunderous presence in the European skies ultimately paved the way for Allied air dominance, proving that sometimes the most unglamorous, seemingly unwieldy weapon can deliver the most devastating blow.